Hey guys, Rushy here and welcome back to another video. Now, as you might be able to tell, I'm looking a bit different than how I looked in my previous video, and the reason for that is earlier this month I decided to shave my head and my eyebrows. The reason being I'm experiencing hair loss on my head and on my eyebrows, so I've decided to shave them off to see how it would look and to avoid any more hair falling out. So long-term viewers of this channel will know I have a hair loss condition called alopecia areata. Basically, the condition causes hair to fall out in circular patches and it can affect all hair on your body. So head hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, facial hair, body hair. Me personally, I'm experiencing it on my head, eyebrows, and body, chest mainly. So I'm not going to go in depth into my hair loss in this video because I've made previous videos about my hair loss and other types of hair loss as well. I've previously made a documentary about all known types of hair loss. I made a video when I first shaved my head. I've created a short video showing a time lapse of my hair loss, how it's progressed over the years. I created a video discussing my hair loss journey throughout my life last year. And I've also created a video discussing the Will Smith versus Chris Rock situation in regards to Jada Smith's hair loss. All those videos are in my hair loss videos playlist, and this video will be going in that playlist as well, so feel free to check them all out. Right, now moving on to the topic of today's video. In this video, I'm going to be giving out advice to you and letting you all know the 4 main ways I've learned how to deal with hair loss. And this video is aimed at anyone experiencing any type of hair loss. This video is for adults, children, men, women, boys, girls, anyone experiencing any type of hair loss. The advice in this video applies to all of us. So there are 4 main ways you can deal with hair loss from my experience of dealing with it since a very young age. That's not to say there are other ways you can deal with it as well, but these are the 4 ways I know of and I've learned over the years. And I have tried all 4 of these options throughout my life. So number 1, you can ignore your hair loss. Number 2, you can embrace your hair loss. Number 3, you can disguise your hair loss. And number 4, you can treat your hair loss. So firstly, let's start with how to ignore your hair loss. This can definitely be easier said than done, and it also depends on, how much hair you've lost as well. Obviously, as you would expect, the less hair you lose, the easier it is to ignore. But when I was growing up with my condition, it was quite mild for most of my childhood and into my early teenage years. I had bald spots, but it was only affecting my head hair at the time, and specifically small bald spots at the back of my head. I didn't even know I had alopecia areata at that time because no one else in my family had it. I thought it was a birthmark, and because I couldn't see it, it was at the back of my head. I ignored it for years, really. Like, I ignored the hair loss I have on my chest, on my body, because I'm not really interested in growing hair in those areas. Same with facial hair, I'm not interested in facial hair either. The only hair I am, would like to grow back and do think a lot about is the hair on my head and my eyebrows. Ignoring hair loss can definitely be a good way to deal with it because, there are far worse things to have wrong with you than hair loss. Most, if not all, forms of hair loss aren't signs of bad health in general. It doesn't really affect you physically like an illness. It just mainly affects your appearance, which obviously can affect you more mentally and emotionally and psychologically than physically. Some forms of hair loss, like male pattern hair loss, androgenetic alopecia, especially in men, is quite common. My dad has that type of hair loss, and so does a friend of mine who made my hair loss documentary with me. And because those types of hair loss are generally socially acceptable, even though I think all forms of hair loss should be socially acceptable, it's easy to ignore because you won't really stand out because it's such a common form of hair loss. But any type of hair loss you have, you can try to ignore it. There are a lot more serious concerns someone can have about their life than hair loss. And if you can deal with it by not even thinking about it and not letting it control your life at all, then that's definitely a bonus. And it's worth giving it a try. I tried that throughout my childhood and it worked. But that's definitely a good option to try and pursue. Feel free to try it out and see how it works because it's free, it's cheap, physically you don't really need to do anything, it's just mentally you need to try and reprogram your mind. Okay, now moving on to the second method of dealing with hair loss, and that is to embrace hair loss. Similar to ignoring hair loss, this method is free and you don't need to worry about treatments or disguises. And it's more of a mental change, a mindset change rather than a physical change. So it's taken me a long time, but I'm finally starting to embrace my own hair loss now. And for me, embracing hair loss means fully accepting your hair loss, fully admitting it if someone asks you about it, not being ashamed of hair loss. And one way to do this is just to be open and honest about it if anyone asks you about it. And also admit to yourself as well, sometimes, there is a denial process when, you're losing hair, maybe you think it's not actually hair loss or it's something else. Realizing you're losing hair and coming to terms with it can definitely be really helpful in terms of dealing with hair loss. Obviously, like step one, this is easier said than done and it takes time. Like with me, for example, what helped me embrace my hair loss is reaching out to other people who have alopecia areata, especially on Facebook groups, on social media, getting in contact with other people who have my condition to share how I'm feeling and ask for advice, help, and support. That's really helped me come to terms with my condition. And that goes for anyone with any type of hair loss. One thing I recommend you do, no matter whether you want to treat, disguise, embrace, or ignore your hair loss, is find out what type of hair loss you have and connect with other people who have the same condition as you. And physically, you don't really need to do anything to embrace your hair loss. You could just rock a hairstyle showing your hair loss, or doing what I've done at the moment, shaving my head completely, being completely bald, embracing complete baldness. And, letting hair loss be a part of your life, but in a positive way rather than a negative way. And one thing I want to reiterate is that hair loss is nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed of whatsoever. You should never feel ashamed of your appearance, especially if, like with most types of hair loss, it's out of our control. It's not our fault that we are losing our hair. So yes, I definitely recommend trying to embrace your hair loss. Again, like I said, this is easier said than done. It takes time, but just try to, reprogram yourself mentally, reach out to other people who have the same condition as you, and just give it time to think about it and realize and understand that it's not your fault that you're losing your hair and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Your appearance should not be something you should be ashamed of, especially if it's something out of your control. You should be judged on your actions rather than your looks, and you shouldn't judge others based on their appearance either. And don't let anyone ever make you feel ashamed of your appearance. Now, moving on to the third way to deal with hair loss, and this is to disguise hair loss. Now, unlike the last two methods I mentioned, this requires not so much a mental change, change in your thought process, but more of a physical change. So I have tried this in the past as well, and trying to disguise my bald spots. And the easiest method I used to do that is to grow my hair out long, because I still have a lot of hair despite having a few bald spots. Once I've grown it out to a certain length, my bald spots become very hard to see. I enjoyed having longer hair and getting full coverage, so my bald spots weren't that noticeable. But on the flip side to that, I wasn't used to having longer hair. When I was young, even before I had hair loss, I always kept my hair quite short, so I wasn't sure how to style it. Plus, it took up quite a lot of effort trying to style my hair every morning. But there are other options as well. One of the most common options for disguising hair loss is to wear wigs or toupees or specialist hair systems. These options can be quite costly, and I recommend doing research into wigs and hair systems and hair pieces. Usually, the more costly they are, the better they are. And ideally, if you want to cover your hair with a wig, you want it to look like natural rather than, you don't want it to look obvious that it is a wig. But that can be a really good method of disguising hair loss because no treatment required and you can get the look you're after. Another way of disguising hair loss is to change your clothing. For example, wear hats, especially if you're losing hair on your head. A common way to disguise that is to wear hats. Hats are usually quite cheap depending on what type of hat you want to wear. A beanie type hat, a baseball cap, a flat cap or a die cap. There are multiple different types of hats available, cowboy hat even. And yes, they can be a really good fashion accessory, and depending on what you're wearing, you won't look out of place. Of course, maybe if it's a really hot summer's day, it can be quite uncomfortable wearing a hat. Another method of disguising hair loss is to try and make your hair look fuller and thicker by using a tattoo system called scalp micropigmentation, where a specialist applies a tattoo to your head to make it look like you have hair. For example, with my hairstyle now, it'd be like a buzz cut hairstyle, but say if you don't have any hair at all, you can create your own hairline. Or with me, for example, I can inquire about getting my bald areas tattooed so they blend in with the rest of my very short hair. Because even when my head is completely shaven, well, almost completely shaven, but my bald spots are still quite noticeable. And even though I've shaved my head, I still wear hats every so often to keep my head warm, but also as a good method to disguise my hair loss. Wearing scarves, head scarves as well, can definitely be a good disguise, especially for women. Maybe like me, if you're losing hair on your eyebrows or eyelashes, wearing glasses may be a good disguise. And like my previous two ways of dealing with hair loss, there's nothing wrong with disguising your hair loss either if you want to. Don't be ashamed of trying to disguise your hair loss because, like I said, we all deal with hair loss in different ways. And many people say, oh, you shouldn't disguise, you should just embrace it or ignore it. But that's easier said than done. And what works for someone might not work for someone else. So, whilst I recommend you try to ignore your hair loss and you try to embrace your hair loss, feel free to try and disguise your hair loss as well and see how that works. Like with all the other methods of dealing with hair loss, if you choose to disguise your hair loss, like for example wearing a wig or hair system, if someone asks you if you are wearing one, just admit it and say, yes, I am wearing a hair system because I prefer the way I look with a hair system. I'm experiencing hair loss, but I'm not ashamed of it. I just prefer the way I look with hair. Or with a disguise, it helps me feel more confident in myself. And if it helps you to feel more confident in yourself, then that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And finally, now moving on to the fourth method I have of dealing with hair loss, and that is to try and treat your hair loss. Now, out of all the methods of dealing with hair loss, this is the most medical one. This one requires the most knowledge about hair loss. It can also be the most expensive method, and its success varies depending on what type of hair loss you have, how much hair you've lost, and how wealthy you are, and how committed you are to trying to treat your hair loss. So I have also tried to treat my hair loss, and I have had some success with treatment. With my type of hair loss, alopecia areata, it's not as common as other types of hair loss, so there's not as much known about it and what causes it. For example, I'm not sure what's caused it in my case because I've had it for so long and it's a very unpredictable condition. But I did see a hair loss specialist last year. I'm based in Britain and I visited the Maitland Clinic, and they actually have a show on TV in the UK. It's on the Quest Red TV channel and it's called the Hair Loss Clinic, and I highly recommend you check it out. I didn't feature on the actual TV series, but I met one of the women on the TV series, Eva Proudman, really nice lady. And she diagnosed my hair loss, but I'd already been diagnosed a few years earlier by a GP, a doctor. But she also provided treatment for me. She provided a minoxidil topical solution spray. I'll show pictures of the actual spray bottle I received now. It was quite expensive. I think it cost me about £80, and this is for quite a small bottle, and it was a 3-month supply, and it was directed to be used twice a day to spray onto my bald spots and rub it into the bald areas of my head and my eyebrows. And it was quite effective. I have regrown most of the hair I lost at the back of my head using that spray. Thankfully, in my case, I was starting to get some natural regrowth anyway, so that did help, but I do think the spray helped as well. I used it once a day instead of twice a day, so I made my sample last 6 months instead of 3 months. But whether it would be more effective if I used it twice a day, I'm not sure, but I know if I did use it twice a day, I would have run out a lot sooner than I actually did. And yes, I did get some success with treating my hair loss. Like I said, I've regrown a lot of bald spots that I had on the back of my head, but I have since started developing bald spots on top of my head and on both sides of my head and on my left eyebrow. So don't give up hope. There are treatments out there. A lot of them don't work, but some of them do work. So make sure you do your research into the treatments. And also it is quite a demanding process as well. You need to put the effort in. For example, I had to make sure I rubbed the spray on my bald spot at least once every day, and I did miss a couple of days. So it is quite demanding and could be quite costly, and takes quite a lot of effort to find a treatment that works for you. But once you do find a treatment, it can be really rewarding, because if you can successfully treat your hair and regrow hair, then you won't need to worry about trying to disguise hair loss, or trying to embrace hair loss, or trying to even ignore hair loss if you have fully regrown your hair and you don't have any hair loss whatsoever. So, like all the three methods I previously mentioned, I would recommend trying to treat your hair loss naturally as well, but also non-natural treatments, like for example, for androgenetic alopecia, hair transplant, and other types of hair procedures. There are definitely treatments out there for most, if not all, types of hair loss, and they're currently doing research into hair loss as we speak right now. So it's always worth checking again in future, to see if there are any types of treatment available for your type of hair loss. Because like with my hair loss, there's no cure for it, but there are treatments available that has helped regrow some of my hair. So that concludes this video, guys. Those are the 4 methods that I've learned on how to deal with hair loss. Firstly, you can ignore your hair loss, which I've done in the past and I continue to do now, but ignoring hair loss can be a really good way of dealing with it. My second method of dealing with hair loss is to embrace it, and that can be a very good way of dealing with hair loss. With this method, you don't need to worry about treatment, disguises, or trying to ignore it. You can make it a part of your life, but in a positive way. And, if you successfully embrace your hair loss, you don't need to worry about hair loss for the rest of your life. And that's what I'm trying to do at the moment, in a way. Thirdly, you can try to disguise your hair loss. And I've done this previously by growing my hair out long, wearing hats, wearing hoods, and you don't need to worry about treatments for hair loss or worrying about a cure for hair loss with this method. You can just accept it and disguise it. And the final method I've learned on how to deal with hair loss is to try and treat your hair loss. Now, this might be the most costly method, and it might also be the most difficult, but it could also be the most rewarding, especially if you're successful, because you're curing or treating your own hair loss, you're getting positive results, and then you don't need to worry about disguising your hair loss or trying to embrace your hair loss or worrying about ignoring your hair loss if you have regrown your hair and you're not experiencing hair loss anymore. But like with the other methods I mentioned, be honest about trying to treat your hair loss as well, about what treatments you're using, and also be honest and open about it so you can educate other people on how to treat hair loss. Like I said, I've tried all 4 of these methods throughout my life. There is no right or wrong way to deal with hair loss. It's only the way that is best for you, and we're all individuals, so it'll be a different method would work best for everyone. But it can be hard to find out what way works best with you if you don't try any. So in my opinion, I recommend you try all 4 methods I mentioned in this video. And, being honest about your hair loss as well can be really beneficial, because in my opinion, you shouldn't lie about your hair loss regardless of which way you want to deal with it. Be open about it and be honest about it and admit it. It's not something that you should be embarrassed of or ashamed of. It shouldn't be a taboo subject. And like I said, regardless of whatever method you choose and how to deal with hair loss, be honest about it, be open about it, and be supportive of other people dealing with hair loss, or dealing with anything for that matter. Honesty is definitely the best policy when it comes to hair loss, in my opinion. And don't let anyone ever make you feel ashamed about your hair loss. And I think one of the best ways I've learned to deal with hair loss is to try new things and be open to new suggestions and new possibilities. So I've shaved my head for the meantime. I'm going to experiment with this look for now and see how it continues. I'm in the process of trying to regrow my eyebrows as well. Well guys, I hope this video has been useful or helpful for you. And like I said, this video is aimed at anyone experiencing any type of hair loss. Thanks so much for watching this video. Feel free to contact me by leaving a comment in the comment section of this video. I respond and react to every comment. And like I said, I'm trying to continue with that 1 video per month upload schedule for the rest of this year. With that being said, guys, thanks again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next month in my next video. Goodbye.